When people talk about food in World War II, the conversation usually stops at ration books, victory gardens, or black market trading. What gets far less attention is the quiet, deliberate stockpiling that families carried out long before bombs fell or supply lines collapsed. Across Europe and parts of Asia, civilians who survived the longest shortages were often those who understood something modern societies tend to forget. Calories are useless if food cannot last. Preservation, not abundance, was the real currency of survival. In the next few minutes, we'll look closely at the foods World War II families deliberately stockpiled for years at a time, why those choices worked, and why many of them remain foundational to modern preparedness today. If this kind of grounded, historically serious analysis matters to you, subscribe to The Survival Record. This channel exists to preserve lessons that were paid for in hardship. Bread was never the foundation of survival, but grain was. Fresh bread disappeared quickly in wartime. Bakeries relied on fuel, yeast, and predictable flour supplies, all of which were disrupted early. What endured instead were whole grains stored dry and intact. Wheat berries, rye, barley, and oats were common across Europe because they resisted spoilage when kept dry and cool. Families could grind them by hand or boil them whole into porridge-like meals. This practice shaped post-war military doctrine around decentralized food resilience, reinforcing the idea that raw staples outlast processed ones. Today, the same principle applies. Intact grains stored properly can last decades with minimal nutritional loss. Dried beans quietly became the protein backbone of civilian endurance. Meat rationing hit early and stayed severe. Dried legumes, lentils, peas, chickpeas, and various beans filled the gap. Salted meat mattered less for comfort than for strategic flexibility. Salt pork, cured beef, and preserved sausages were rarely eaten daily. Instead, they were held back as strategic reserves. Salt preservation allowed meat to survive without refrigeration, though at the cost of flavor and texture. In many households, salted meat was used sparingly to flavor soups or stews rather than eaten outright. Canned foods represented industrial power translated into civilian survival. Canning expanded dramatically during the war, not just for armies but for civilians who could afford it or acquire it through ration systems. Vegetables, meats, and even bread substitutes were sealed and shelf-stable. Dried potatoes replaced fresh ones faster than history usually notes. Potatoes were central to European diets, but fresh potatoes rot quickly without controlled storage. Dehydrated potato flakes and slices became common substitutes. They required less space, resisted spoilage, and could be rehydrated into filling meals. Powdered milk quietly protected children and the elderly. Fresh dairy collapsed under fuel shortages and transportation damage. Powdered milk filled the gap, especially for infants and hospitals. Though unpopular in taste, it provided calcium, fats, and proteins that would otherwise vanish. Sugar functioned as both food and morale insurance. Sugar was not nutritionally essential, but it was strategically vital. It preserved jams, stabilized canned fruits, and boosted calorie intake quickly. Cooking oils proved more valuable than butter ever could. Butter spoiled quickly, without refrigeration. Vegetable oils, lard, and rendered animal fats lasted far longer and delivered dense calories. Families guarded fats carefully, knowing they were essential for energy and cooking versatility. Shortages of fat were often more dangerous than shortages of protein. Dried fruits extended nutrition without relying on sugar alone. Apples, plums, apricots, and berries were commonly dried at home before war reached its worst stages. Dried fruit delivered fiber, micronutrients, and natural sugars in compact form. It also resisted spoilage remarkably well. Hard cheeses outlasted soft ones and became portable nutrition. Aged cheeses like Parmesan, Cheddar, and Alpine varieties survived months without refrigeration when properly stored. They offered fat, protein, and salt in stable form. Fermented vegetables quietly prevented nutritional collapse. Sauerkraut, pickled cucumbers, and other fermented vegetables provided vitamins when fresh produce vanished. Fermentation required no fuel, once complete, and improved shelf life dramatically. Honey outperformed sugar when storage stretched into years. Honey never spoils under proper conditions. During the war, it served as sweetener, preservative, and minor medical supply. Families who had access to honey guarded it carefully. Its longevity made it one of the few foods truly immune to supply collapse. Few modern foods match its stability. Coffee and tea survived not as luxuries, but as stabilizers. Caffeine was rationed but rarely eliminated. Coffee substitutes existed, but real coffee and tea were prized for their psychological effects. Maintaining routine mattered under prolonged stress. Flour was less reliable than people remember, but still essential. White flour spoiled faster than whole grains, but it remained widely stockpiled because it could be used immediately. Vinegar tied preservation systems together. Vinegar enabled pickling, cleaning, and minor medical uses. It extended food life and reduced waste. These foods mattered because they aligned with reality, not optimism. World War II civilian survival was not driven by innovation or abundance. It was driven by restraint, foresight, and respect for limits. Families survived by choosing foods that tolerated uncertainty, disruption, and time. Those lessons remain relevant because the underlying risks, supply fragility, infrastructure failure, human error, have not vanished. Remembering these overlooked details matters because preparedness is not theoretical, it is historical. If you value careful, evidence-based examinations of survival and history, subscribe to the Survival Record and share this video with others who care about understanding the past beyond the headlines.